What's up, folks? Today we're going to be installing the hydraulic e-brake, or reinstalling the hydraulic e-brake. The current one in there is not working properly, and we actually had to do a lot of things to get everything working properly. So this is the new e-brake unit that we're going to be putting in. This is custom fabricated by myself somewhat. Did make a video on this, but the audio didn't come out, so it got skipped. So we're going to be putting this unit in. We're going to take the other one out, and I'm going to show you exactly where you're going to need to run the lines if you have a Fox body. So here we go. Alright, before we get started on this install, there's a few pieces of hardware that I want to show you that you're going to need or may not need for this install. So first of all, what we've got here is the residual pressure valve. Basically, this helps to make your handbrake more responsive, and basically if you have disc brakes or drum brakes, it keeps the pressure on the calipers. What we have here is the most difficult part to find. This is a 7/16 by 20 brake line fitting, and this goes into the input section. That's the rear of your master cylinder. Can't buy that in stores. Don't even bother trying, because they don't sell it in stores. You have to special order this. So when you order it, go ahead and buy like 2 or 3 in case you mess one of them up. This piece here is, I don't know what to call it, but it basically changes the type of flare on the inside. So all of your fittings are going to need to be a double flare. So that's a double flare side, and if you look down on the inside of this, that would not be a double flare sitting. This here is a 3/16 long nut, and you need this if you are not using this adapter here. If you don't use the long nut and you try to use the regular brake fitting, this is not going to screw all the way down in there, and it's never going to produce a solid seal. Finally, we've got the little mini tube cutter, and this is just a really handy tool to cut brake lines, and it fits in a lot more spaces than the full-size brake line cutter. Alright, so we've already pulled out the previous e-brake unit. If you ever see this type of unit on eBay, don't buy it. Just go buy yourself an ASD. Don't try to save money. These things are garbage, and that's why it's out. Alright, so a brief overview of exactly what we're going to be doing here today. We've got a reel of 3/16 line, because that's the size of your brake line in your Mustang. What we're going to be doing is we're going to actually be tapping into this union here, and this is right on the passenger side. You can unscrew this. You can run one line inside and the line back out from the inside to there. So this is actually your rear brake line right here. So you can see where that is in the engine bay. And we're going to run that down from the bottom. If you see where that little drain is for the inside air box, whatever you call that thing, we're going to drill a hole right under that. That's where the brake lines are going to run into the car. And the location of the e-brake is going to be right where the stock e-brake used to be. So right here we're in the passenger footwell, and we've got the carpet pulled back and a little bit of the sound deadening, whatever this insulation is. And if you look right there, that's where that drain comes out from this heater box or whatever. And we're just going to put 2 holes right underneath that, which we're going to run the brake lines through. Alright, so what I'm doing here is I'm cutting myself a piece of tube that I'm going to make a practice run on. And if you've never flared tubes before, you definitely want to do a couple of practices with it before you go ahead and try to do one on your car. So what you do, this is a crappy tube flare set. You don't want the one with the thumb screws. You want the one with the nut on the end that you can ratchet down. This one is a little bit more difficult to use. But anyway, you put the tube into the correct hole as shown. You've got to get it the correct distance out from the hole. And a good way to gauge that is to put this fitting down, and I'll show you what that does in a second. And you want to get it below the line on that fitting. So as you can see there, it's below the line. You want to get that as tight as possible. That way your tube won't slide out. And you want to take the correct fitting place it inside of your tube. You're going to put this clamp down on top of it, and you're going to tighten this down as much as possible. Once you get it all the way tightened down, you're going to take this fitting out, and then you're going to tighten it down again directly on top of your tube, and that's going to give you a double flare. So I just did the first stage here, and I've created what's called the bubble flare, or the single flare, or whatever you want to call it. The flare that we want is the double flare, the double bubble, or the inverted flare. So now that you see this, we're going to put this tool back on here and tighten it down again. So what we have here is a inverted flare or a double flare. This is not a good one because, as you can see on this video, it's not even. You want something that's going to look even straight down the middle, and it should be even all the way around. If it's lopsided, it's just not going to seal up properly. Really not happy with this type of flare tool. It's just not giving me the results that I want. So I'm going to go and get a better tool and come back and do this again. Alright, so check it out. I went ahead and got a better flare set. As you can see, it's got these hex connectors on the side, and you're actually going to put a ratchet and a socket on here to tighten this thing down, rather than the flimsy T-handle and thumb screws, the giant thumb screws. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a shot, try and make myself a practice flare on here, and go ahead and flare my lines. Alright, as you can see here, I've got myself a nice practice flare. It looks kind of crusty because this line is painted and the paint flaked off when I tightened it down. If I was actually doing this for real, what I would have done is put this fitting onto the line first, like such, and then I would do my flare on this side. Alright, just to clear up space while I'm working in here, I went ahead and unscrewed this from the firewall, whatever this vacuum crap goes to, and I'm going to go ahead and unbolt this brake line from the firewall. That way I can pull it out and manipulate it a little bit because it gets kind of tight when you're trying to tighten this stuff down. Alright, so I still haven't flared the lines yet. I wanted to go ahead, since I have extra line right now. You always want to cut your lines longer than what you need, so as you can see, they're all the way up here. While I have extra line, I wanted to go ahead and make sure I got everything exactly the way that I needed it. So as you can see, it comes up from the hole right down there by that airbox drain. It comes up right behind the wiring harness, which I'll be moving back into place a little bit later. And it comes up right to here. So I haven't exactly decided exactly how I'm going to bend it, but basically these two lines are going to connect to these two sections here. Inside the car, you'll see in the passenger footwell that they run directly underneath this box. I don't feel like pulling the carpet up to show you where they come in, but they come in right here. And they run along the footwell right next to my speaker wires. And they go underneath the carpet right along this area here next to the console. They pop up right here next to my seat, and I have them running into the back of the console here. So from here, they're actually going to loop back around and come into the master cylinder, and that's how it goes. So I guess the next thing to do is to get everything trimmed up and connected. Hey, check that out. Anyway, so far we've got the lines plumbed up in front. It looks a little bit ugly right now. I've got the lines pulled up because I want to test it for leaks before I actually push them down back into position. But what I have here is the line coming from the master cylinder, and I've got my residual pressure valve before the handbrake. You can install it before the handbrake or after the handbrake. It behaves a little bit different depending on which way you set it up. Unfortunately, I don't know all the details. I just decided to do it before the handbrake. It's really hard to find details on this, so if you happen to have any good details on this, definitely post it in the comments. But anyway, this is the union that comes back out from the handbrake and to the rear wheels. All right, so now we've got the lines run on the inside. This is probably the most difficult part when you're using these long nuts, even because this is even a long nut as well. These lines have to be perfectly straight in order for you to get the nut on there and get the tool on there for you to be able to flare it. So you're gonna do some work getting that together. And then you gotta bend it down in place, and it's gotta be the correct length and everything like that. So have fun with that, but it's all piped up. The next thing for us to do is to bleed the system, or attempt to bleed the system, and see where it leaks, because I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have some leaks somewhere that I'm gonna have to go back and redo the flares. So that's that, and next I'll show you how to bleed the system. All right, check it out. We've got the rear of the car off of the ground, and we've got our bleeder screws exposed. I already put my wrench on here. Depending on what year your Mustang is, it's going to be a different size. Mine is an 11 mil because I have the Cobra rear end, but it's going to be the same process for whatever car you have. So what you're going to do in order to bleed, don't bother buying the cheap bleed kits. All you need is some clear tubing and a clear water bottle. And you need the tube to be able to reach down to the bottom of the water bottle and to your brake bleeder screw. I actually have the easy bleeders that'll allow me to bleed these things without opening and closing the valve a million times, but I'll go ahead and tell you the process that you would do if you don't have easy bleeders. Okay, so the process of getting this thing bled is you're going to open up your master cylinder, have your brake fluid ready, and you're going to have the tubing hooked up like such, going down to the bottom of your bottle, and inside the car, if you were bleeding like normal, you would just pump the brake. So you press the brake down, open the bleeder screw, let the fluid run out, and then you close the bleeder screw and release the brakes. When you have a hydraulic e-brake, the process is going to be to step on the brake pedal, pull the handbrake. So when you have a hydraulic e-brake, what you're going to do is open the bleeder, step on the foot brake, pull the handbrake, close the bleeder, let go of everything, and repeat until you stop seeing bubbles inside of your line here. It's very important. Do not let your master cylinder run dry up in the front, because if it runs dry, you're actually going to be pumping air into the system, and you're going to have to start over and do every wheel. When you top off the reservoir, it's not necessarily a bad thing to go over the full line, because it's definitely going to go below it once you start going. It's just going to buy you a little bit extra time if you go above the fill line. All right, handbrake.
Handbrake.
And release.
And release.
Foot brake.
Foot brake.
Handbrake.
Handbrake.
And release.
Release.
Foot brake.
Foot brake.
Handbrake.
Handbrake.
And release.
And released.
All right, so what you're going to be looking for here, you can't really see it on camera, but you're going to be looking for tiny bubbles to be moving through this line here. And when you don't see any more bubbles, you can kind of see them traveling. When you don't see any more bubbles, then your brake system is properly bled. So you may actually go through a bottle depending on how bad it is. This one actually went clear pretty quickly. I'm really surprised. I don't mess with a lot of brakes, so I'm learning along with you, but that's how you do it. All right, folks, very important. When you go to tighten this bleeder screw back on, don't go all Hercules on it, because if you mess around and strip this bleeder screw and your caliper, you're gonna have issues. So, you know, if you wanna be extra technical, go get yourself a torque wrench, and I don't know how you're gonna do that with a torque wrench, but, you know, just don't go crazy with it. Just make it nice and hand tight, and when it stops pulling, don't put extra strength into it. All right, folks, good news. I've checked all of my unions, and I've got no leaks. This is like the first time I've ever put lines together and not gotten any leaks, so I'm really excited right now. So what I'm gonna do is put this line back down carefully, put this back into position. When you're working over here, if you decide to redo the lines, make sure you take into account that this line is curved for a reason, and it's to clear this hood latch right here. So I'm going to push these lines back down. The other thing that needs to be done is, especially since I have long tube headers, is I'm going to make a heat shielding for these lines down here, because I don't want them to take excess heat from these header pipes. And the last thing I'm going to do is down in the footwell where you see I'm going to make some kind of shield to keep my passengers from kicking my brake lines loose. Alright, it just came back from the store and I went and grabbed this fiberglass insulation. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to wide it up and basically tape it to the brake lines that are near the headers with this aluminum exhaust tape, and that should provide me a pretty good heat barrier so that I won't be heat soaking my brake lines. Alright, so check this out. I've taken this right here, I've taken a pretty large section off of that fiberglass and just covered it in the foil tape, and what I'm going to do is just kind of mold this piece around the brake lines and secure it there, and that should act as a good heat shield. Alright, so here's what I've come up with. It's definitely going to need to be fixed up a little bit better later, but you know, this is good enough for Gas Monkey for right now, and it's going to get the job done temporarily. So that's what we got. So here is the finished product, folks. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please leave them in the comments section. I'd also like to add a shout out to Ford Motor Company Drift. That's FMC Drift on Facebook. They gave me a lot of good information for this e-brake install. Thank you very much, guys. See you later.
Oh yeah!